This is how all the moms in Beijing do it, so this is how I'm doing it. Hi everyone! Today I have a really easy and delicious chicken dumpling recipe for you. Most of our dumpling recipes are pork-based. We do have a couple other chicken dumpling recipes on the blog, a chicken and zucchini dumpling and a chicken and mushroom dumpling. This one is even more basic. It's chicken and napa cabbage. I actually based this recipe off of the dumpling recipe in our cookbook, which is a napa cabbage and pork. And this recipe is just really streamlined. It's just like, hey, I want some dumplings. I don't want it to be complicated. All you need is the chicken, the napa cabbage, and some seasonings, and you will be off to the races. So I thought I would also be off to the races today on this, but unfortunately our local 99 Ranch ran out of dumpling wrappers and our grocery store did not have ground chicken. So I'm going to be showing you how to hand chop meat. I have boneless, skinless chicken thighs here, and I'm going to grind it myself using just a chef's knife. You don't need any special equipment. And I'm going to show you how to make dumpling wrappers with just all-purpose flour and water. It's easy, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed that this wasn't going to be just a dump everything in there and mix it and then assemble with store-bought dumpling wrappers day. But the bright side of the homemade dumpling wrappers is that for that extra effort, you get way better texture. They fry, steam, and boil a lot better than store-bought wrappers. And the sealing of the wrappers is also way easier. You know, when you have the store-bought wrappers and you're like sticking little bits of water in behind the pleats to make sure it all sticks together, there's no such step with the homemade dough because it just sticks to itself much easier. So, silver lining. Grab your laundry to fold, start unloading the dishwasher, and fire up the treadmill because we are making chicken dumplings from scratch. So first I'm gonna make the dumpling dough. So I'm gonna measure out all-purpose flour. So the proportions of this recipe are 1 pound of ground chicken, 1 pound of napa cabbage, 2 packages of store-bought dumpling wrappers, or if you wanna make your own dumpling wrappers, you're gonna need 3 1/3 cup all-purpose flour and a cup of water to make the dough. I have a scale here. I just find it easier to measure by weight. So it's 430 grams. At the Walks of Life, our 1 cup of flour is 140 grams. I've seen like measures out there where it's like 1 cup of flour is equivalent to 126 grams or 125 grams or something. And no matter how much I like sifted the flour and fluffed it and spooned it, whatever, I could never get it to be any less than like 140. Maybe I could get it to 135, but for the way that most people are measuring, you're just like, maybe you fluff it a little bit in the container and then you scoop it. It's like, it's 140 grams. So you're gonna need 430 grams of flour. So now I'm just gonna add the water. And then I'm gonna make a dough. And it's gonna seem pretty dry at first. After we form the dough and knead it, we're going to let the dough rest, and that's gonna make it a lot more elastic, and it's gonna make rolling the dough really easy. So we're coming together now. I'm just gonna add the remaining water. You have this kind of scraggly dough, and you can start to knead it. Just fold it over onto itself. The entire process takes about 10 minutes to really get the dough into like a smooth and cohesive state. Basically just knead it until it's a smooth ball. And that's gonna take about 10 minutes.
Is it worth making in the mixer or no?
Yeah, no, you totally could with a dough hook. This is how all the moms in Beijing do it, so this is how I'm doing it. The moms and grandmas of Beijing, and dads. My flour and water are all incorporated. I have a relatively smooth ball of dough here. The reason why you add the water gradually is because if you're in the middle of winter and it's really dry, you may need slightly more water. If you're in the summer and it's humid, you may need less. So just add it gradually. I ended up needing to use all of the water. It's February, it's really dry in the house. The dough, as you can see, is not like so smooth, like it is a little bit lumpy, but that's fine as long as it's like relatively cohesive. I'm just gonna cover this. Usually I cover the bowl with a plate or I cover the dough with like an overturned bowl. You don't need to use plastic wrap, and I'm gonna let it rest for 1 hour. So I need a pound of napa cabbage. I'm just gonna pull the leaves, and I have the scale. So I'm gonna wash this. Sometimes there's little like dirt, bugs and such. You wanna make sure that they're well rinsed. So now that my napa is washed, I'm going to slice it into thin strips lengthwise. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna salt it, and the salt is gonna draw out all of the water from the napa. And then I'm gonna squeeze it dry. So if you've seen our video on the only dumpling recipe you ever need, that is sort of what we did. Well, we did a slightly different method where we blanched it and then we squeezed the water out. In this case, we are going to salt it and squeeze the water out. So I just stacked 2 leaves on top of one another. I do 2 at a time. And I'm just gonna cut them lengthwise. Okay, now I'll turn it this way and then cut crosswise. And you're gonna see after we salt and squeeze out the water, it's really gonna take down the bulk of the vegetable as well. Okay. Now I'm going to mix in a teaspoon of salt, which is gonna draw out that water. And I'm gonna let the napa sit for 30 minutes. So I just wanna make sure the salt's all incorporated. And that's it. I'll let it sit for 30 minutes.
To the chicken!
Yes. Now I'm gonna show you how to hand chop this chicken into ground chicken just using this knife. You may have seen one of our most popular videos, which is how to grind meat without a grinder in minutes. We'll link that video right here and in the description box below. I'm gonna start by slicing on an angle on one side, and you're gonna cut the chicken about 75% of the way through. You don't wanna slice directly through it. And then I'm going to flip it, and then I'm gonna slice again, sort of going in the opposite direction. Okay, then I'm gonna flip it again, and then I'm gonna cut at a 90-degree angle this time. Then flip again, and then go the opposite way. And as you can see, it's already like breaking up. It's getting harder to just keep in one piece. Okay. And then I'm gonna repeat that with the remaining chicken thighs. Just sort of slice on a 45-degree angle to start. Then you flip it over and then slice in the opposite direction. Flip it over again. And now slice 90 degrees. And if you have a cleaver, this is all that is easier for sure, because you're gonna see the step that I do next is gonna involve like kind of just like bashing the meat and chopping it. And this is actually a really good step if you wanna make sure that what you have is dark meat ground chicken, because often the ground chicken at the store is like breast meat, which isn't really ideal for dumplings. It's just not juicy enough, it's not flavorful enough, and doesn't have as much fat. And buying boneless, skinless chicken thighs is cheaper than buying ground chicken. That's another thing. It's like more economical. Now you have this sort of pile of meat that's like a lot more loose. And now you can start kind of just doing this to chop it. So you basically just like continually like push the meat together into a pile and then chop. And the more you can hear that knife like hitting the bottom of the cutting board, it's like you know that it's sort of getting down into the meat. It takes longer. This is as far as I've gotten with the chef's knife. You could continue to do it, but the cleaver is definitely gonna be faster. It's just heavier and just works for this purpose better. So I'm just gonna change the angle that I go at, right? So I just did 90 degrees, now I'm going like at a 45 degree. And then I'm just gonna flip the meat over like that and keep chopping. So you're like surfacing parts of the meat that haven't been cut through. And if you keep folding the meat over, you're gonna get a more even texture. So this is the way that a lot of people in China actually make ground meat. They'll buy a whole piece of like pork or, you know, usually pork, if I'm being honest. and they will just chop it like this. And this is how they get that ground meat texture for dumplings, for buns, for whatever. By hand chopping the meat, you have actually a slightly coarser grind, and the texture of the meat is better. It's almost like it's not as mushy, it's not as mealy, it's like more succulent, the texture of the meat. If you're making like, I don't know, like Thai basil chicken, like doing it this way is better, tastes better. There we go. Hand chopped ground chicken. And you know exactly the piece of meat it came from. If you wanted to buy organic ground chicken, but they didn't have organic ground chicken at your store, you could just buy organic boneless, skinless chicken thighs and chop it yourself. And then I'm gonna season it. If you've watched any of our other dumpling videos, you know this cast of characters. Shaoxing wine. Neutral oil, we're using avocado oil, but you could use vegetable or canola, whatever neutral oil you have. Light soy sauce. Sugar. Sesame oil. White pepper. The next ingredient to add is ginger. I'm going to use quite a bit, 2 tablespoons of grated or minced ginger. If you're not super confident in your mincing skills, I would grate it. If you feel like you're a mincing master, just mince it. It's easier. I think it's easier. But I'll grate it today. You need 2 tablespoons. It really brings out the flavor of the chicken. Okay, so now I'm going to start mixing. I have 4 chopsticks. That makes it a bit easier to incorporate everything. I'm going to start slow because there's a lot of liquid in here. Okay. So I'm going to mix it. And at this point, I want to mix it like in one direction until it has a pasty consistency. As you can see, all that liquid, the chicken absorbed it really quickly. Okay, so now I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of chicken stock. Now that it's sort of emulsified, I'm going to just gradually add that. I'm actually just using Better Than Bouillon, chicken bouillon paste mixed with water. So the next step is to squeeze the water out of the Napa cabbage and to add it to this filling, mix it in, and then we can assemble the dumplings. So this Napa cabbage has been sitting in this salt for 30 minutes, and as you can see, a lot of water has come out of it. And now we're just going to squeeze out the excess and then add it to the filling. So I'm just going to squeeze. Okay. Okay, so let me take a picture of this because, wow, that's a lot of water. So I'll just start by folding the cabbage in. And then once it's sort of all sticking to some of the chicken, I will start stirring. Okay, let's take out the dough. As you can see, it's way more soft and pliable after resting. It's had time to absorb that moisture from the water in the dough, and it is a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to work with about 1/4 of it at a time. And I'll put the rest back. Keep it covered so it doesn't dry out. Then I'm going to roll this piece into like a rope, and then I'll cut it. So I think this is like the correct amount of dough for one wrapper.
So don't you want to cut it all into little pieces?
No, I like to do it one at a time because then it doesn't dry out as much. I mean, you can, if you feel like you can work quick. So I have this little circle of dough here. Just gonna roll it out and just flour the rolling pin. And you want a circle like about 3 inches in diameter, I would say. So there we go. There's our little dumpling wrapper. You generally want to be assembling your dumplings as you're rolling these wrappers out, because otherwise if you roll them all out and then start assembling, the ones that you rolled out initially will start to dry out and you may see some cracking. So you could have 2 people working at the same time, one person rolling and the other person assembling. That would be really efficient and fast. But generally you want to avoid like rolling too many out in advance because you don't want to give them a chance to dry out. So I'm going to add like a tablespoon of filling here. So now I'm just going to pleat. And as you can see, you don't need any water. The dough just sticks to itself.
That just looks darling.
And that's it. It looks like the Mulan dumplings.
Yeah, it does.
Flouring the rolling pin is the most necessary thing because the rolling pin, you want it to just slide off the dough. And it really doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Like you could stretch it out and like sort of like, you know, it's really forgiving. Cute. From this one you can see like sort of it's an irregular shape. It's not a perfect circle, but when I pleat it, I'm just sort of gonna stretch and pull in places and it's gonna look perfectly fine. That's why this dough is a lot more, the homemade dumpling wrappers are in some ways easier. Okay, so now we're gonna cook our dumplings. So I have a nonstick pan here that is heating and I just added a little bit of oil. I'm gonna drop the dumplings in. So if you've watched any of our previous dumpling videos, you kind of know the spiel. You put the dumplings into the oil, you're gonna wait for them to brown on the bottom, and then you add water, cover them, and when the water has evaporated, you will be ready to have some dumplings. You keep an eye on it. I gotta keep assembling. Are they brown?
Yeah. They're to your liking.
Ooh, look at that. Very nice. Okay, we're gonna pour in the water, just enough to fill, sort of cover the bottom, and we'll cover it. And reduce the heat to medium, medium-low. Okay, so all of the water has evaporated. I'm gonna uncover them. And you just wanna make sure that the bottoms are nice and crispy, which they are. Nice and golden. I like to put some of the dumplings facing up and some of them with the bottoms up so that you can kind of get a sense like, ooh, crispy dumplings in my future. Whoa. Hot. Really good though. Super juicy. So good. It's juicy, it's gingery, it's super flavorful. Chicken, not always the most flavorful meat, but with all of the ginger in here, the sweet napa cabbage and all the seasonings we added in there, it's a really simple recipe, but very, very tasty. Make sure to make our perfect dumpling sauce to go with it. And the homemade wrappers, you know, it was a little upsetting when going to the store and finding out that they didn't have wrappers, but when you make them yourself, get the recipe at thewalksoflife.com. Okay.
Good, but you left out the unloading the day one.
Get the recipe at thewalksoflife.com.